Welcome to BK Academy of Chess. The Evans Gambit is a chess opening characterized by the moves e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian game bishop c5, and with 4. Before, we have the Evans Gambit, an aggressive variant of the Giuoco piano. The idea behind before is to sacrifice a pawn in order to secure a strong center and bear down on black's f7 weak point. Ideas based on bishop a3, preventing black from castling, are also considered. According to Reuben Fine, the Evans poses a challenge for black since the usual defenses, playing d6 and or giving back the gambit pawn, are more difficult to pull off than with other gambits. Remember the famous evergreen game? It started off with the Evans Gambit, see the link in the margin. The most obvious and most usual way for black to meet the gambit is to accept it, with bishop takes b4, after which white plays c3, and black usually follows up with 5. Bishop a5, bishop e7, and, less often bishop c5, and bishop d6. After the main line bishop a5, white usually follows up with the Emanuel Lasker's line, also known as the Bronstein defense, d4, d6, castle, bishop b6, d takes c5, d takes c5, queen takes d8, knight takes d8, knight takes c5, and bishop e6. This variation takes the sting out of white's attack by returning the gambit pawn and exchanging queens, and according to Fine, the resulting simplified position is psychologically depressing for the gambit player, whose intent is usually an aggressive attack. Chigorin, whom did a lot of analysis on this opening, found after 8. D takes c5, the following alternative: queen b3, queen f6, bishop g5, queen g6, bishop d5, knight ge7, bishop takes c7, king takes e7, bishop takes c6, queen takes c6, knight takes c5 and queen e6, which avoids the exchange of queens, but reach no clear verdict. Instead, white often avoids this line after 6. d6, with the following line: queen b3, the Tartakova attack, queen d7, d takes c5, when black can return the pawn with 8. Bishop b6, or hold onto it with 8. D takes c5, though white obtains sufficient compensation in this line. Alternatively, black can meet d4, with e takes d4, the Pierce defense, when white can try queen b3, a move often favored by Nigel Short. However, the main line continues with castle, knight ge7, the May-c defense, knight g5, or c takes d4, with d5, returning the pawn in many lines. After 7. Castle, the materialistic d takes c3, compromised defense, is well met by queen b3, with a very dangerous initiative for the sacrificed pawns. Alternatively, after castle, is d6, c takes d4, bishop b6, known as the normal position, in which black is content to settle for a one-pawn advantage, and white seeks compensation in the form of open lines and a strong center. The gambit before can be declined with bishop d6, when a4, a6 is the normal continuation. But due to the loss of tempo involved, most commentators consider declining the Evans Gambit to be weaker than accepting it, then giving up the pawn at a later stage. After before, bishop takes b4, c3, the bishop must move or be captured. The pros and cons of the common retreats are as follows. Bishop a5 is a popular retreat that gets out of the way of white's central pawns and pins the c3 pawn if white plays d4, but it has the disadvantage of removing the a5 square for the black knight. As a result, black usually retreats his bishop with bishop b6, to facilitate knight a5, which is particularly strong when white opts for the bishop c4 queen b3 attack on the f7 square. Another popular retreat is bishop c5, often played by people unfamiliar with the Evans Gambit, but is arguably not as good as bishop a5, because d4 attacks the bishop and narrows down black's options. Often been considered one of the safer retreats is bishop e7, and has been played by Anand. After d4, knight a5, White can attempt to maintain an initiative with bishop e2, as played by Kasparov, or immediately recapture the pawn with knight takes c5. The Stone-Ware defense bishop d6 reinforces the e5 pawn and has been played by several grandmasters. The Mayet defense bishop f8 slows down black's development and is very rarely played. And there you have it, the Evans Gambit. Thanks for tuning in to BK Academy of Chess, where together we build, and over the board we even the score.